Welcome to our 2024 Master B2B predictions for B2B e-commerce. My name is Brian Beck. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Andy Hoar, my partner at Master B2B. For those of you who don't know Andy, longtime veteran of B2B e-commerce, Silicon Valley vet. He was with Forrester Research running B2B e-commerce there for 7 years, now the CEO of Paradigm B2B. Andy, excited about our predictions today. Welcome.
For those of you who don't know Brian and his zigzaggy shirt, Brian is a 20-year industry veteran. He's been, sometimes to joke that he's been like a B2B e-commerce action figure. He's been a systems integrator. He's been an author of a book called $1 Billion B2B Commerce, which I actually have right here, Brian.
Excellent.
I dug it out of the trash and I found it, so there it is.
You're rough, man.
And he's also the managing partner, in all seriousness, of a company called Inceba, where he helps companies sell more effective, B2B companies sell more effectively on Amazon. Did I miss anything, Brian?
That's about it, Andy. I'm excited to be here, and we've got some great predictions, folks. And you know, this is a webcast, and we've got some special guests lined up to join us to comment on whether we think that we got these predictions right or wrong. And you, as the audience, you get to vote on to whether or not you think we got them right or wrong. Well, at the end of each of our 6 predictions today, we're going to post a poll and ask you if you think we got them right. And we're going to hold ourselves a little bit accountable here, Andy, to what we did last year. But, you know, Andy, this is a great group. I was looking at the list as we're getting started here of who's joining us. We've got Stanley Black & Decker here. We've got Nick from Toyota's here, Kimball Midwest, Jeff Reichert's here, Cisco, Rents Weintraut. Hey, we're Rents. Nice to see you. Dawn Foods, 3M, Ergodyne, Teresa Kuski's here. We've got Carrier Enterprise, Vincent the Monster Mugavero. Remember the Monster? He was a guest on one of our on webinars. Hain Supply is here, Owens Corning, Hershey's, Schneider Electric. So it's a who's who, Andy, of our industry as usual. And you know, really, I think curious about what we think is going to happen in 2024 in B2B e-commerce. So we'll get into that in just a moment. But before we do that, we want to talk a little bit about our 2023 predictions and whether we think we got them right or not. So why don't we go ahead and share a little bit about that? So Andy, you put this together for us. Why don't you take us through this?
Well, I'm happy to say we got most of them correct. So just going down the list, distributors will get squeezed by vertical marketplace. I think there's a lot of evidence, anecdotal and empirical, that in fact is happening and happened. Is power shifting from B2B employees to employers? No doubt about that one. That one happened in spades. And by the way, these percentages were what people voted last year, whether they agree with the prediction or not. So is the C-suite transforming into the D-suite? That's one where maybe it didn't happen as quickly as we had hoped for. And in fact, we have another prediction about that coming up. But look at the number. Last year, 76% of people predicted it was going to happen. So there's definitely a desire for this. The problem with this, as always, is, you know, I remember reading once about startup companies, and somebody said, all problems are people problems. So the reality is this is exactly what's happening in the larger organization, the more pronounced the people problem is. Do sales teams finally get sold in digital as a way to make them more money? I think this one actually did happen. It has been happening. I think the pandemic certainly accelerated this. And I think this 53% number, which is right on the edge, I know the clients I've worked with this year, and I think you have as well, have reported back to us that salespeople are now starting to see it. The tools exist to make digital enablement possible. There's a lot of evidence that you can offload sort of the recurring stuff, the low value stuff, to the friendly 24/7 website and then focus on consultative selling. So that one I think is also the case. Does search and discovery take priority over personalization in B2B for 2023? We predicted that they were going to focus more on search and discovery and less on personalization, which is a far more complex kind of notion in B2B, because usually groups are, as opposed to individuals, buy these things. And so how do you personalize for a group? But I think we saw a lot of evidence that there was a kind of a shift back toward the nuts and bolts of search and discovery as opposed to trying to personalize everything.
Right.
And then the last one is 100% of the people on the call last year said major data quality issues will still persist.
Yeah.
It's a nice one to end on. We have another prediction about that. Yes. Did that one happen in 2023, Brian?
I think it did, right? It's continuing. And seriously, folks, I mean, this is the hot topic of our roundtables we're doing in regional markets around the country now, where, data and, addressing it with AI and other things, can it be solved that way, et cetera. It's a hot topic. It is persisting and it will continue. So we'll get into our predictions for 2024 on that and other things here in just a moment. So I think we need to go ahead and roll our first prediction for 2024. Let's see who our first special guest is. I think it might be Nostradamus.
Prediction one.
Oh man, I just love that. This is the funniest thing. So Andy, let's talk first about our first prediction here, which has to do with AI. So this has been all the buzz this year, Andy, in 2023, and the hype. The prediction number one for 2024, the hype over AI or generative AI is real, and the overhype is also real. Well, what the heck do we mean by that? Well, let's share a couple of data points here. We think that there's certain aspects of AI that are actually quite productive and can be used today, but also there's a lot of buzz around it, which isn't necessarily warranted. Here's a quote from McKinsey, September 2023. Gen AI is only in its nascent stages of development and usage. This smart technology is only going to get more intelligent, and those who don't learn to work with it starting now will be left behind. Okay, McKinsey, gloom and doom. But what's practically being used?
Well, Brian, can I just intercede here? Because do you realize that was done before ChatGPT actually became pervasive, which only happened earlier this year? This was September of 2023, right? Oh, I'm sorry, that is this year. So I take it back.
Come on, Andy, stay with the times, man. So 90% of our B2B buyers organizations plans to leverage AI as part of their digital strategy in some way. So this is saying that buyers organizations are planning to use this now over the next 12 months, primarily to forecast sales and provide a better user experience. This is a survey of 150 B2B executives just last month in October 2023. So from our perspective, what we're saying here is there's going to be some practical use cases which have emerged and are continuing to emerge. And we'll share a couple of those in just a moment. So the fact of the matter is, though, trust remains a significant concern amongst B2B users. Inaccuracy, cybersecurity, intellectual property infringement are the most cited risks. Number one being inaccuracy of the potential data. And so you hear about, Andy, hallucinations and other things. So there's also some concerns and risks around the use of this. So when we asked our group on LinkedIn, when it comes to solving the data problem in B2B, is AI really ready for prime time? 60% said yes, it can be used today. This was a poll less than a month ago. No, hold off, it isn't ready. We think that it is ready and that some of the hype is warranted, but not all of it. It's not, you can't just turn it on and forget about it. So our prediction is AI will be significantly utilized next year, but it's still going to be a bit of a discovery process. Andy, any thoughts before we bring in our special guest on this one?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag, but generally the trajectory is up. But it's not a no-brainer. There are certainly some issues around AI that are worth considering that hold things back. And it's important to note, and we're going to talk to our special guest about this, there's a difference between AI and Gen AI.
Right.
And maybe that's a good segue to bring in Sheerine.
All right, let's bring in our special guest, Sheerine Reid, Director of Product Marketing at Conveo. Now, for those who don't know Conveo, they live and breathe this stuff all day long. I mean, you guys have been at this for a while, Sheerine. So welcome, first of all, to the webcast. Why don't you tell us, Sheerine, whether you think we're right or whether you think we're wrong?
Okay, well, thanks for having me. Great to be here. And yeah, so first off, I think I agree with you to some extent on this one, but then there's big caveat, right? So coming from Conveo, as you just mentioned, and our company has AI as a core part of the platform. Right. We can't lump all AI together. So some of it is hyped, I would say, and some of it's definitely not. So under the AI umbrella, if you think of things like machine learning, deep learning. And then that other part, which is the large language models, the LLMs, generative AI. So those are all a little bit different. We've been doing this for 10 years now on the machine learning and the deep learning side. And we've seen like a lot of adoption, specifically in B2B over the last 2 to 3 years, let's say. And a lot of results in terms of, how you can actually manage that experience layer. So things like search, recommendations, faceting, all that stuff. And it definitely, we've seen impacts in terms of, improving findability, better relevance, higher conversions, average order value, all those things, all those good metrics that people care about. And that really can add up, to the magnitude of millions of dollars for some of our customers. So definitely, I don't think there's any overhype on that side. But if we now look specifically at what's gotten everyone excited over the last year, and that's ChatGPT and Gen AI, there's definitely a little bit of overhype going on that end. I think we've seen, excitement in being able to, do things like write a poem or an essay in a few minutes on a Saturday night, or, trying to scam the teachers by not actually doing all of the work and the research there. But it kind of gave us an excitement around what could potentially be applied in a business context and, certain business use cases. But I think when it comes to actually operationalizing that, it's been a lot harder than what people expected. So I'm just going to give you some examples here. Over the last 9 months or so, we've had a lot of conversations with CIOs across our customer base because they were deep into evaluating whether they wanted to go ahead with some of these projects. And there were some real concerns there around, and we dubbed them the CIO headaches. So can Gen AI really be enterprise ready? And that, ranges from, and you touched on some before, like security and accuracy, the way we even set up that experience for people, right? Are we going to have a search box over here and then a Gen AI experience over here? How do we interact with the information? Where does that content live? How accurate is that content that lives? And what's the security and the permissions on who can access it? Costs is another big one. I mean, Gen AI experiences right now can be 100 times more expensive than a current search experience if it's not engineered right. Wow. So you really need to have, a good business case, I'd say, or at least a business hypothesis that's going to support that type of expense or investment.
What's driving that, Sheerine? 100 times more expensive? Is it just labor and workflow and management of the prompt?
No, it's the processing on being able to compute all of that information, the large language models. You have to, you have to engineer it properly to have vectors and such and chunks of the data so that the computational effort is a little bit less. So yeah, there's going to be, in the next year or so, probably a lot of efficiencies to be gained. But for right now, it's very expensive. Yeah.
So what are some of the practical use cases you're seeing for this? It sounds like it's used a lot obviously in search and product findability, right?
For AI. Now, for the Gen AI aspect, we see actually some really exciting use cases happening like right now. And I think you were talking about maybe this being an impact later down in the time horizon, but I actually think it's going to start to show some impacts, or has started to show some impacts right now. And it's going to pick up in 2024. We see some early adoption of it. And one of our customers, for example, and some of them is really compelling. They've adopted it for, there's a company called Xero, one of our customers, and they provide accounting software to other businesses. And they've used generative answering solution live on their site. And they've been able to run some A/B tests to see, is it effective? Is it not effective? And amazingly, they've been able to improve their case deflection rate by like 20% on their site. So that's like service and support area. So you think, oh, well, maybe it doesn't apply so much on the commerce front, but it does, because you can quickly see how, translating that to commerce can be really, really exciting, because people that come to your site aren't just necessarily the ones that come to just quickly find something, order, put something in their cart, reorder, find a part quickly. There's that audience, but you also have a wider set of audiences that might be coming to your site. Think of like all the engineers that are there to like educate themselves around your products.
Interesting.
And that can have like huge impact. We have a customer of ours who's in the electronic components space. They're a distributor. And what they're looking to do is attract more engineer users to their site, because they can see enormous impact that flows through to their revenue. And it can translate to a lot of dollars, because think of it. Engineer comes to your site, they go and they're looking for information, and then you have all of this rich content maybe that you've indexed and that's surfacing up and that you can produce answers from. So like product brochures, market guides, anything like that, technical sheets.
Right.
And so now they've sourced a component. They tried that for a new product that they might be designing, and they put that component in there. They've ordered maybe 40 components, not like a big transaction. But then they start manufacturing that new product. Then you're looking at knock-on orders from that, like $100, $200, $300,000 maybe down the line. So they see a huge potential in this, in creating those experiences to draw these other audiences in.
Excellent. Well, I think we got to leave it there and go to our poll question. Sheerine, thank you very much for those specific examples. And let's go ahead and pop the poll question, see if the audience agreed with our prediction. Sounds like, Sheerine, you mostly did, which is great. Thank you. And appreciate those. So go ahead and pop the poll question there, Robert. Let's so will Gen AI finally pay off in B2B in 2024? Yes. The hype is real, or no, it's still overhyped. Go ahead and submit your answer there. Andy, I've seen the same thing in terms of use case. A lot of it's on the service side, product findability, things like that. That's where I think it really will shine in 24.
Sheerine, actually, Sheerine mentioned something when we talked to her for the prep for this call. She actually had a great line that she didn't mention here, but I'll do on her behalf, which is she said, "You're not going to lose your job to AI, but you will lose your job to a competitor using AI."
That's great. That's
and
great.
I think that's really well said. I think it's also the case that generative AI is a very different animal from AI. And I'm glad she pointed that out as well, and which is why we think that there are some over-the-horizon use cases here that I don't think even people have imagined now. We've gotten a little ahead of ourselves with some of those, but there are some real use cases, and people should be really concerned, I think, on the job front, and companies should be really hopeful about the ability to increase productivity with Gen AI. So I'm looking forward to this one, but I think we got this one right, that some of it's overhyped, but some of it is not.
I totally, and I'm hearing that across the practitioner landscape, Andy, for sure. Well, Sheerine, thanks for joining us. We have to move on. Everyone hopefully voted. Thank you again for your comments. So let's go on now to number 2, prediction 2. Prediction 2. I love how Robert integrated some laughter into that. Robert, nicely done. Really funny. So there we go. Prediction number 2. Andy, you want to lead us through this one?
Yeah. So we want to play on words here. So say goodbye to the CDO. Say hello to the CDO. What do we mean by this? Well, traditionally speaking, the CDO was called the Chief Digital Officer. And we actually believe that in 2024 and beyond, we're going to see a transition where the Chief Digital Officer is going to sort of lose some altitude in terms of the CDO acronym, and what's going to effectively step in to replace that. And we think years from now, it'll be a foregone conclusion that CDO will in fact be the Chief Data Officer. Yep. Now, they're not exactly mutually exclusive. It isn't the case that, a zero-sum game where you get one but not the other. But the reality is we have seen the Chief Digital Officer kind of play out here for a couple of years. And before we move to the next slide, I wanted to just comment quickly on this, that, you and I have talked about this a lot, Brian, that the Chief Digital Officer has become a catch-all for somebody who's responsible for e-commerce, et cetera. And I'm not sure we know what the et cetera part is here. And if there's not P&L responsibility tied to it, if there isn't a real business tied to it, if it's just a center of excellence with a title in front of it, slapped in front of it, we don't believe actually it's going to be a very successful thing. And we've seen this play itself out. There's some very good Chief Digital Officers out there who actually do have P&L responsibility and they are successful. But there are quite a few out there who just have this title of Chief Digital Officer as though they're the Oracle of Delphi for all things digital. And I think the reality is if nobody owns the business here, it's really a business function. It can't just be, like I said, a center of excellence for all things digital because everything in the organization is digital. In fact, I think you made a really interesting comment once, but only once, that the Chief Digital Officer is the CEO.
That's right. I do believe that. And yeah, I think the CDO role has not, in most cases, been set up for success. Chief Digital Officer. But let's get into some of the data here. And why is the Chief Digital Data Officer now so important, Andy? Why do we think that's going to that's going to come up.
So we've had several conversations this year with a variety of executives, and we keep coming back to these kinds of data points, which is that, Gartner predicted 40% of businesses fail to achieve their objectives due to missing, incomplete, or inaccurate data. I mean, I often describe data as the water that runs through the city. Everybody dumps everything in there, but you got to drink out of this thing too. And if it's dirty, and in this case, incomplete, it's not going to be, you're not going to have a very healthy ecosystem. And I think, Gartner was early to this. Others have pointed this out too. And companies that are farther along in their digital journey always come back to the same point, which is we did everything else and the data dragged us down. There are other couple of data points here to suggest here. Robert, next slide. This one's a oldie but a goodie, that bad data costs the U.S. economy $3 trillion per year. And I'll bet this is actually a low number, because I'm not even sure. I mean, it was the Harvard Business Review, so it's a reputable source, but how did they even calculate 3 trillion? My sense is it's a lot worse than that.
Yep.
And going on here. So what is a chief data officer? I think there's been some confusion around that. And I think this is a pretty good description. So I'm going to just read it. The chief data officer is the senior person with a business focus. That's key. They don't just get lost in data, who understands the strategy and the direction of the business. Again, 2 times in this description, the word business comes up, but they're focused on how to underpin that business with data. And so their job is, how do we feed this thing with the right kind of data? Again, I don't know. I can't think of a more critical part of an organization, because from my perspective, the one thing without question that separates one company from another company is their data. You can't argue the people necessarily. You can't argue the customers necessarily. Those things are fungible. But the data is unique to an organization. If you don't get that right, you're kind of screwed.
Well, I think too, Andy, that we think that in making this prediction, we believe that companies will finally recognize the importance of this function and give it a C title. And you may argue, well, isn't this a passing function? You get the data cleaned up and off you go. Well, we think that companies are going to make this a priority, because they've been talking about it for years. Now we hear amongst practitioners in looking at some of this data that this issue has come to a head. 2024, not every company is going to have a chief data officer, but we think we're going to see an emergence of a class of people here, and it's going to grow in the next year.
Well, and to that point, 2 quick slides about where this stands right now. So the latest data we have is from, I think, 2021 on this, and it's not specific to B2B. So round the numbers down, but only 21% of the top 2,500 publicly traded companies had a CDO in place. And half of them had been appointed in the last 2 years. So it's a very new thing. That trajectory is interesting. And then the last slide here, this one's stunning to me. 42% of CDOs, remember, chief data officers, are still not members of the C-suite.
Crazy.
What's the C for? Exactly. But we actually polled this a couple months ago, and we said in 2024, which CDO should B2B companies hire? And I think mostly because the companies we're talking to are still early into this evolution, this will definitely change. But still, the vast majority are saying if you had to choose one or the other, go for the chief digital officer. But I think we've actually laid out the more advanced companies have been down that path and realized, you know what, that's a great thing. Nothing inherently wrong with it, but it better have P&L responsibility. And don't forget, without the data, none of this happens.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with that, Andy. And I think, it's fascinating to me. The market in B2B, it's just another example of where they're sort of still catching up to, B2C. So in terms of the percentages. So let's that's our prediction number 2. We need to move on for time's sake to prediction. Oh, wait, we got hold on. Hold that thought. Thank you, Robert. Will chief data officer emerge in B2B in 2024? Please go ahead and answer your question to see if we agree with us. Almost messed up our process there, Andy. But
so we turned this one down a little bit because we believe that right now the more appropriate question is, will the chief data officer emerge in B2B in 2022? Right. It's not will it replace the chief digital officer. Will it emerge? Because it's arguable that it still won't, that it's still going to be covered up by the chief digital officer, and that the data officer in B2B is still years away. This is the question we're asking. Do you think it emerges this year, or are we still looking at a couple years away on this one?
All right, so everyone, please submit your answers here. We do have to move on for time's sake. So go ahead and close up the poll, and let's go to prediction number 3. What do we got here? Prediction 3.
Prediction 3.
All right, Brian, this is all you.
This one's close to my heart. Yep, prediction number 3. Go ahead and post it. Amazon Business will begin. I wanted to say something stronger here, but we said begin to steal the mid-market. I think they already have begun to steal the mid-market. Let's look at some numbers. Go ahead to the next slide, Robert. This is the growth of Amazon Business product sales, 2016 to 2025. In 2022, Andy Jassy, the CEO of Amazon, finally recognized, or should I say in April 2023, he finally disclosed that Amazon, in a public earnings call, that Amazon Business is now the fastest growing part of Amazon. $35 billion in B2B sales just through Amazon Business. That's not all Amazon B2B sales, by the way, because there's people that don't have logins to Amazon Business that are still buying on Amazon for their business. $35 billion projected to go up to $59 billion in a few years. Andy, they've become a legitimate distributor with a much broader assortment in many product categories than the leaders in distribution in those categories. And I'm talking about, the folks that we know and love across our community here. Amazon is a search engine, and they do a great job getting people to their product quickly. Now, the use case can be different. And this is where we talk about price. And, a lot of mid-market distribution differentiates based on price. And that's the only really thing they distribute or differentiate on. If that's your only differentiation, well, guess what? Amazon is designed for price competition. Look at this model here. I'll cover it briefly. These are two sellers competing for the same product's sale on Amazon. You can see here the red line and the gray line. The gray line, the guy drops his price. The seller drops his price. The red line follows. 10 minutes later, then the gray guy drops it again. The red guy follows him. So at the end of the day, Amazon, as its core, is a price driver. So if you're only competing on price as a distributor, you've got a situation here. When we asked our community of folks, is price still a central deciding factor in B2B purchase decisions? 52% said yes. So more said yes than no. So we can argue that if, as a distributor, and we're seeing this in certain use cases, that that there's price as a key issue, but it goes beyond price too. Amazon has introduced tools specifically for business buyers, purchase permission setting, request for quote, pricing. You can get business bulk prices, quantity discounts, customer specific pricing. You can now buy on credit terms, Andy, on Amazon Business. They've integrated to procurement systems. They've added quality and all kinds of different features and functionalities. These are things that a lot of mid-market distribution is behind on. Amazon is ahead, and guess what? They've already got an enormous amount of buyers already. All those millennials are Amazon natives, those coming into B2B procurement roles. So at the end of the day, Andy, I think we both agree that Amazon Business is taking the mid-market in a lot of cases. Now, we have a special guest we're going to introduce who has lived this firsthand, Mr. Trent Guyer. Did I say it right?
You did. Trent. Finally. Yeah. Thank you. I've known you how many years, right?
I've known Trent for like 5 years. And of course, I finally say his name right. The VP of Digital and Marketing at Grasshopper Mowers. Those awesome mowers that mow around and go 30 miles an hour. I want to race you on one of these things, Trent. Ooh, don't they go 30? Do they go that fast? Anyway, they mow the lawns at the White House and everything else. Trent, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I agree with you mostly on your thoughts. Yeah. Well, it's a great search engine. That was one of my thoughts, right. That's what we think of at first, just like YouTube's a search engine. I think maybe the NFL hasn't heard it either, as far as from the branding perspective, with a Thursday night football. So everybody knows what it is. Taylor Swift's not here, is she? Your numbers would be better.
Well, I see, might be. Let me see.
But the point is, it's so easy to find product on Amazon because they've put so much effort into search. I think you also are looking for something easy when you're shopping. It doesn't matter who you are. And I think the great, knowledgeable, insightful Andy Hoar might have said that one time years ago, that it doesn't, I think that was you, that it doesn't matter what industry you're in. You want, even if you're in government, you don't want to just shop from text and ellipses and reading across a line. You really want that experience that you have in your home life and whatever you buy, right?
Right. Did you call Andy great?
So what I like about Amazon is the purchase is easy, the return is easy. Those are great. Now, the bad thing I suppose about that is I was pretty tired last night. I was researching for this, and I bought a basketball goal that mounts in concrete. I bought a washer dryer combo, and I bought a dump trailer for my yard, right?
Oh,
all those things on Amazon. Why? Because I can.
Right.
Because I can find them at any time of night, and because I can return them. Okay. And this is where I disagree with you, maybe, when it comes to somebody like, say, our business. We work really hard with our dealer network. They know their customers. They might know the fitment of something better and what might fit your application. And they can take equipment back easily. So let's say those things that I just bought, I want to return. That's pretty difficult for that seller to maybe accept that return back. The other thing, go ahead.
So the fact of the matter is you say your dealer knows fitment. They know what the customer has in a way that Amazon doesn't. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right. And they know the product obviously as well. So they know our product. They know that the FXJ 5000 will fit this belt, but the FXJ. So you go into a listing on Amazon and you say, okay, I need this item and it fits the FXJ 5000 and the 6000. Well, I have the 7000. Well, that must fit that too, right? I'll just go ahead and buy it. It's easy to return, right? So you those are the issues that you might have to work with. So I love Amazon for all things helping a small business, but the one thing that you have to get right is fitment. What fits what? And does it fit there's a lot of times you might get a sale for something that's not even for your product. You might sell your item that you manufacture to somebody else because they think it fits. They're all the same, right? Talking about a mower's a mower. They all cut grass, right? Not exactly. Everything fits different. Performance is different, all those sorts of things.
But Trent, I got to jump in on this one because you mentioned this 3 or 4 times just in the last minute or two when you've been talking, and you keep mentioning returns, and which is reverse logistics. Does Amazon have an unfair advantage here in the mid-market in terms of reverse logistics? Because the other way to solve the problem you just mentioned about fitment is just to order 3 or 4 different versions of it and plug it in and see which one works and return the others. Is this, again, an unfair advantage for them, or do companies in the mid-market have a fighting chance on this front?
I think they maybe have a fighting chance, but as a customer on Amazon myself, I'll probably do that. I'll buy a few of something and then I'll return all of them that don't fit. And that's great if you're buying some light bulbs or something. I don't know, little things. But if you're buying, say we make snow throwers for our equipment, I would love to be able to sell a snow thrower to an area where we can't reach somebody, because that's really most of our sales happen when the customer is too far away from a dealer, or it's after hours, standard working hours, like buying in the middle of the night sort of thing. But the return, so Amazon loves that, and they're really pro-consumer about that. But on the return, they're also pro-consumer, and that's really a logistics nightmare for me. I can get it to you. I can schedule the LTL truck or the UPS truck or whatever. I can't go gather that nearly as easy.
So you have an Amazon program, obviously, Trent. You're selling, right. And I think you looked at the incrementality of the sale, and you actually found a lot of your sales are incremental coming from Amazon, right?
Right. Yeah, it's usually because people have to drive maybe 35 minutes one way to get somewhere. But we also have found that every year sales are increasing, and the reach is really good. So that's what I like about it. I think it's all building upon itself. Maybe each year we surpass our sales from the prior year earlier and earlier in the year. And I think that's part of the Amazon ad network. I think it's just come back to search, all that.
Keep growing, and their B2B business keeps growing. Okay, let's go to our poll question. Let's see if people agree with us. Will Amazon business begin to steal B2B market share, mid-market, in 2024? Yes or no? Trent, that's a lot of good points there, I think, as people are voting here. It seems to me that it's different. And what I've found is sometimes it's a different use case why people are buying. But again, that differentiation, if you're not differentiated some other way as a distributor, as a dealer, you're not providing that service, that fitment knowledge, the expertise on how things work together, I think you're at risk. And I think we're already seeing that a lot of that $35 billion coming from mid-market, in particular distribution. I think it's impacting some of the bigger guys a bit too. But anyway, Andy, any final thoughts before we wrap this one?
I can't believe we didn't mention this because I just noticed this in the last couple of weeks. Maybe because I'm under a rock, but I just noticed that Amazon Business has TV commercials now. Have you seen them?
Sure have. Yep.
And they weren't doing that a couple of years ago. And those TV commercials are more consumer-ish, not hardcore business, right? Granger's everybody's doing it now because they're targeting these prosumers, et cetera, who are watching football games and so on. But that's a sign. I mean, it's a sign that Amazon actually believes there's some there. So I think we're kind of right about this one. But the mid-market is in play. You think you're more aggressive. You think it's already been in play, and Amazon, they're probably right about that. Amazon already got the camel's nose under the tent, and it's farther into the tent than people realize. But I think for companies that think the mid-market was sacrosanct, and Amazon wasn't really going to play there, they were staying with the enterprise and the government, which they've done pretty well with. I think they got another thing coming.
All right. Well, Trent, thank you very much for joining us today. Great comments. Appreciate it. We'll see you soon. We got to go to our next prediction, number 4. What do we got? All right, Mr. Hoar, prediction number 4. Let's drive through this one. We're running a little behind on time, so let's talk through it.
Yeah, so no special guests but ourselves on this one, and we wanted to do that because we wanted to be perfectly candid on this front. So the prediction is the future of the platform, the e-commerce platform, won't be headless, but it will be composable mostly. So we're hedging a little bit here, but we thought it was important to kind of talk about this because these two have been conflated.
Right.
They're not the same. But, because of the language, some misunderstanding around it, there are a lot of vendors, for example, who talk about headless and they mean composable, and they talk about composable and they throw in headless. Here's the definition. We've done a lot on this. So there's a formal definition of headless and an informal one. The formal one is it's kind of an architecture where the front-end experience is decoupled from the back-end experience. And so things like checkout, et cetera, are things that you're just not going to have. You can separate those things and you can go with best of breed, which is where it kind of crosses over into composable. The informal one is literally, it's a method where you can use APIs to connect a growing number of digital touch points. Okay, surprisingly enough, that starts to cross into, but not yet become composable. So what is composable? Well, we got to hand it to Gartner, the ones who kind of defined this a couple of years ago. But it's a concept of weaving together packaged business capabilities. So things like search and PIM and payments, as I mentioned, to deliver a differentiated solution. It's more modular, enables you to basically break up the entire system, whereas headless is really just separating the front from the back. Composable is separating everything. So you can just literally have all the different pieces composed together as one. Which is why we believe the days of headless are kind of waning. Headless is sort of a fait accompli at this point. Everybody offers headless capability. And in fact, because everybody offers headless, there's a new line of differentiation that's emerging, which is headless companies that are now putting, you ready for this? The head back in. And so they're headful headless. Right. So there are a lot of platforms doing that. And also, because in the mid-market, which is now sort of a late adopter and doesn't always hit, the concepts the earliest, in the enterprise space, composable headless been around for a long time. Right. In the mid-market, they were still kind of married to this idea of an all-in-one monolithic solution, simply because they don't have the resources to do a lot of this stuff, meaning you don't have like tech staff there to handle it and so on. But now, the headless and the composable folks who went 100% in that direction, who want to sell into the mid-market, are coming to these companies saying, guess what? You could compose everything. Right. You can break it all apart. And they go, wonderful. I don't want that. Right. They don't have the people to do it. I can't choke 100 throats. I need one thing. So that's hence the headful headless folks. But again, the reason we think composable actually is real and going to win, and I spend a lot of time, as you know, looking into this. Yes. It's because in theory, and it's becoming more in practice now, it's more modular, it's more flexible, you can tailor experiences. There's more of an ecosystem that's built around it. You're not on the bleeding edge anymore if you're doing this. Mm-hmm. But, and I will say this though, but there is an argument for packaging the packaged services together, which is an ironic statement, but then you start getting into an quasi-monolithic sort of
redoing the full stack, right?
Exactly. So it's going to be use case specific. I think fundamentally, and at its core, composable will be the nature of what people do in the future. But there are going to be people selling various versions of composed things pre-composed, hence the concept.
But what are the cons?
Well, we mentioned them that, at least early on, one of the challenges was that you had to have people who could compose all these things. I mean, it's like building a kit car. My dad was into kit cars when I was a kid, and he used to order these things through the mail, and all the kit would show up. And it's like, okay, you can build the entire car, including the wheels, or you can just have the engine pre-built and you kit car the rest of it. And I think what we're seeing is that as people are not quite as sophisticated, they don't have as much time. They want some pre-composed versions, which then begs the question, like we were just talking about, what point do pre-composed composable things effectively become the old kind of monolithic solution with a new old wine in new bottles?
Yep. All right. Well, let's go to our LinkedIn poll and see what people said. Do the flexibility benefits of composable commerce outweigh the costs and resources required to successfully implement it? 53%, this was a year ago, Andy, we did this. Benefits outweigh the cost, 53% said yes. So that's interesting. Curious what everyone on the webcast today thinks. Let's go ahead and pop that poll.
This one's been evolving, right? And I think that was an anchor. And then I think, this is maybe new at this point, but we say, well, pure headless be replaced by composable in B2B in 2024, meaning is the concept of just having a headless and that being enough kind of done, or are we going to see more runway with that? I
see composable as really the best of both worlds. I mean, you're getting the flexibility that was promised with headless, but then you're getting some elements of the head. I mean, at the end of the day, as a practitioner for almost 20 years, Andy, we've got to make it easy as we can for that practitioner to be able to, at the business level, to be able to make changes, to be able to adopt things and adapt. And I think composable gives you that capability. So
as long as it's not 100% composable, again, with my kit car analogy, I don't want to build an engine. I might want to build a car, but I don't want to build every component of the engine. And
but that's our prediction, right? That's where we're going. Is that exactly what you're saying? Is not,
as opposed to here's your car,
right?
And then you can replace things after the fact. I think it's more the case that here are the components, some of which are pre-composed, and go for it.
All right, we got to get to our next prediction. We got 2 more. We got 15 minutes, Andy Hoar. Number 5.
So you're gonna explain this to folks here, but I just want to say,
sure am. This is one of the ones that I'm totally into here. So for years, we've heard that, you get the argument, if you're trying to make the argument as a VP of e-commerce, that my ROI case needs to be incremental revenue for B2B e-commerce. So everything I do in e-commerce needs to be incremental to everything else I'm doing. Well, we're saying that the ROI case is no longer incremental. It's an element, but it's existential. And if we look at this traditional e-commerce revenue relationship or equation, this is how we've always thought about it. Well, my revenue is equal to my sessions, my web conversion rate, my average order value. It's all incremental revenue coming from e-commerce, or it needs to be. And the CEO says, well, how much are you just replacing other channels, other ways I'm selling with e-commerce revenue? And so the VP of e-commerce, the chief digital officer, or whoever's sitting there trying to make the case, it's like, it's not about that, right? What it's about is everything on the top, but it's also everything below the surface. This is the iceberg, right? And I've used this analogy for years. It's the tip of the iceberg is the e-commerce revenue, but it's everything else below that, Andy, that we're saying now that the C-suite is starting to understand, and this is existential. If you're not making the digital change, everything below the iceberg, goes away. It's what's at risk. And if we look at really what drives ROI, the real story is omni-channel. So this is straight from my book. It's about revenue lift. It's about profit, revenue shift, and profit enhancement. It's about organizational efficiencies. But the key in this is that it's across the entire organization. And as we think about the model necessary to do this, it's, you said it earlier, the chief digital officer should be the CEO. What was something I pointed out not ages, but a couple months ago, that, this really needs to cross all functions. And it's not just about incremental revenue. Those companies that don't realize that are going to lose ground because they're not going to make the investments they need to make. Now, we have a special guest who's going to
actually, before we do that,
Yep.
One quick thing. It's not only not just about incremental, it's also not just about online.
Yes.
Which also gets lost in the equation. You just pointed out below the surface, online affects everything, and
Yep.
it crosses all channels, all touch points. And when you try to measure an ROI and just say it's only incremental and only online, that's not a fair representation at all.
That's exactly right. It is all about what's below the iceberg. And actually, this LinkedIn poll we did earlier this year with the news of cutbacks in digital marketing and people, which approach do you think will generate higher ROI this year? And people said we're doubling down. Almost 70% said we're going to keep investing. So our view is that the market is getting this, that it's changed, and that the C-suite is starting to understand this. Our special guest today is Sheerine Daley. Let's bring Sheerine Daley in, who's the head of strategic consulting at Pivotree. Sheerine, and go ahead and say hello. And do you agree with our prediction?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. So like most things in life, it's a bit of both, right? So I think it is a matter of understanding what the true ROI is, and that's considering all sorts of things. So a lot of companies have what I call a fantasy ROI, which is the cost of developing the functionality. What they don't consider is what is the cost of bringing that to market and having the capability. So, functionality is being able to do something, capability is being able to do that, at scale and being able to be extensible about it. So, I like your diagram or the picture of the iceberg, because a lot of the knock-on values, and I've seen this in a couple of projects, weren't, the value actually came from an area that they didn't expect. So I had a pet supply company that we did a lot of work for as they went into really being able to offer online ordering for their stores. Yes, it increased sales. It was great from that perspective. But what it did, it cut down the error rate. And the knock-on effect with that was there wasn't nearly as many returns. So when we looked at one of the biggest costs that they had, which wasn't even considered as part of this project, was the cost of returns, the loss of brand value because of the inconvenience to the store of having to return something. Imagine returning a pallet of dog food, right? Like that's not an easy thing. And that is actually where the value came. And so as we developed it, we started looking at these other parts of the ROI. So looking at the whole ecosystem and what the knock-on effect of that becomes a real question of what the ROI is. What are you measuring? What is your plan as you start incrementally rolling it out so that as things change, and they do, anytime you introduce something into a new ecosystem, there is a ripple effect. Being able to measure that, monitor it, and then be able to respond to it. And when I say respond, I don't mean to do it in an ad hoc, way. It's being able to predict those and come up with a plan of, if we see this behavior, this is how we'll pivot. If we see this behavior, this is how we'll scale. If we start seeing it this way, this is when we start shutting things down really quickly rather than hoping it'll get better.
And Sheerine, you guys do a ton of work around this stuff. I know that's really the lead of your practice is to help companies understand this. And I'm curious, what do you think about all the different things, all that stuff under the surface? How do you measure some of that? I mean, you mentioned returns being one, cost to serve being one element. Are there any other key metrics or things you can help people understand about, not necessarily just the e-commerce side of it, but the other pieces?
Well, like your point before, right? It isn't just about the online commerce, right? They've all got a knock-on effect. I mean, who goes to a store now and doesn't expect to be able to buy online, pick up at the store, return at store, be able to have it, when you're in the store, to order it online and have it delivered home or pick it up at another store? All of that is expected functionality now. And if you can't offer it, people will go elsewhere. So being able to sit down what those metrics are and being able to monitor them is a critical part. And if you can't measure it, right, you really can't add it into your ROI. Another part to it, as I would also mention, is there's lots of other costs involved in bringing a new capability to market. I mean, the change management, we spoke a fair bit about, particularly in B2B, using the sales team, often they're considered, they're going to be a price to pay in that they're no longer going to have those relationships and those sales. Once again, another client we did work for about 2 years ago, they sort of decided not to even consider the sales team and do this because they felt that there would be too much of a threat there, and they didn't really want to, upset anyone. But what they ended up having to do is use them as the ambassadors. They were in the best position to go in and explain to clients what the value was, why this was going to be better, but not for everything in their catalog. Not everything can be sold online, right? There's lots of things that need to be bought, after hours when you can't ring somebody and ask their advice. But there's a lot of things that you need to buy that involves a more consultative sale, and the online can support that, but you still need those people frontline. So bringing them in as part of your, rollout strategy and getting their feedback becomes very important.
Of course, my favorite metric, Andy, is share of wallet. That ties into that. So that's really good stuff. And folks, hopefully you've all voted on your prediction number 5 here. Sean, great points. Thank you so much for sharing those. Completely agree with that, and change management being a big piece of it that people often underestimate. But thanks for joining us. For the sake of time, we do have to move on to our final prediction. We'll see you again soon, Sean. Here we go with prediction number 6.
Prediction 6.
All right, Andy, this is yours. And what are we saying?
Well, we're saying the talent shortage won't end in 2024. But I did want to make one comment. I want to go back to one thing that Sean pointed out about his fantasy ROI. I think that was a great statement, because what I don't think got fully explained there was part of the fantasy ROI has to do with the time frame.
Yes.
You can have every intention to do the ROI. You can even have the right calculations. But, when he and I were talking in the pre-call about this, he said that there was a company and the salespeople did not get on board with it. And it took an extra 6 to 12 months for them to achieve what they needed to achieve. That pushed back the ROI by a year.
Wow. Yeah.
A year.
Yep.
And so when they started out, they didn't anticipate that. You mentioned the change management part, but that's part of what he meant by fantasy ROI. And I thought that was a great point.
I like that term too. So let's go to prediction 6. Prediction
6. Okay, so the talent shortage won't end in 2024. Now, there's been kind of a mixed bag of information around this. And, the Wall Street Journal did a interesting story about this, saying that pay for new hires is shriveling, especially in IT. And so that's usually an indicator that the supply and the demand are a bit mismatched, and that, in fact, the hot job market, which we've all lived through for the last couple of years, was starting to cool. That said, at the same time, we're seeing things from like IDC, who says 90% of companies will suffer from digital transformation related IT skill shortages by 2025. How do you reconcile these two things? How do you, on the one hand, see salaries coming down, and on the other hand, the demand for these people and the supply for them still being out of whack? Well, we thought of nobody better to kind of chat with us about this than Stephanie Pike, who's been a friend of Master B2B for a couple of years now, is the vice president of marketing at
VideoJet.
VideoJet.
Sorry about that.
I know we changed companies on you, Andy. We were Danaher. Now we're Veralto/VideoJet. It's hard to keep track. It's all.
I was thinking the one that started with B, Veralto. You're right. So
yes.
Anyway, welcome, Stephanie. So what are you seeing? I mean, which one's true? Is it the fact that we can't hire these people, or we can hire these people?
Yeah, no, I hear you. I would say it's going to be harder to hire some and easier to hire others. And I know that's a mixed bag, but when I look at data, I love data. Employment rate, when I looked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 0.6% growth in total labor, unemployment stable from 4.1 to 4.7%. But the top job in demand, data analytics. So any of you who've been trying to hire analytics for the years, God knows I have, so hard, right? And it's going to get harder.
But AI in front of that, and it probably doubles or triples the salary.
I know we're running out of time, but yes, all the AI stuff will absolutely play into this. One of the top jobs in decline are in the arts, design, and media production industry, though. So things like copywriting, design, UX, which should be easier next year. So it's kind of a mixed bag. The other thing I found, which I thought was fascinating, Brian, you'll love this, the total B2B sales globally going from 2.3 to 3 trillion by the end of 2027. And of that, McKinsey's predicting an increase from 20 to 31% of all of that going e-commerce by next year. 31%. I mean, so it's not just billion-dollar B2B anymore. It's multi-billion dollar B2B. So with all of that growth, there is invariably going to be a talent gap that we're going to have to fill. But I think you guys talked about it with the C-suite kind of topic. And it was the faster that those leaders start to understand and embrace it, then there will be more and more of a talent shortage. So it's really a mixed bag.
Well, or those of us who are parents on the call, to get your kids into the e-commerce field, right? Or the data analytics field.
Well, remember earlier this year, Amazon laid off a bunch of people. There were all these engineers floating around. What happened to them? They were all sucked up by other companies, maybe in other industries, but they're not on the streets. No. And so there was a mismatch. The tech companies overhired, and everybody else who still needs that talent effectively has been perennially under hiring, and they sucked all those people up. So there's Stanford computer science degree people working in algorithms, et cetera, for Amazon are now working for consulting firms, maybe even governments, what have you. But the talent is definitely still in short supply, in my opinion, for the really best people.
Well, folks, let's go ahead and pop that poll question, see if you all agree with us. Will hiring challenges ease in B2B in 2024? Yes or no? Do you agree that it's going to continue to be a challenge as we have postulated here? Stephanie, any final thoughts before we wrap up on this prediction?
I would just encourage everybody to be experimenting with AI. The more I play with it, the more I learn about how it can replace human labor. So yeah, everyone should be trying.
Prompt engineer is probably the biggest, hottest new job out there, right? Engineering prompts for Gen AI. So yeah, I think it's definitely a growth path there for folks in their careers. Well, Stephanie, thanks for joining us just for a few minutes here. We appreciate your perspective as always. Let's go ahead once we close up that hiring challenges poll there, and we need to get to our conclusions, which we'll do in just a moment. Any thoughts, final thoughts, Andy, on the hiring piece?
Yeah, you know what? I do think AI is going to impact a lot of this. And I think one of the challenges is people are applying a perfection standard to AI, just like they are to self-driving cars. It's the same thing. If you look at, everybody can't stop talking about the cruise vehicles in San Francisco that have crashed and whatever. And that's not to be ignored. But you want to compare that to what the alternative would be if we weren't driving those cars around. And I assure you, that people who have modeled this, including insurance companies and actuarial folks, know that the number of deaths, injuries, damage is substantially higher than it would be with the self-driving cars. And I think AI is going to prove the same. Is it 100%? No. But what if it's an 80% replacement and you only need 20% of a human to do this last part? Oh. Yep. That's when it starts to get really interesting.
Oh, it'll make hiring easier, that's for sure. So let's go ahead and reveal our poll results, Robert. I think we're ready for those. Let's see if people agreed with us. Will AI finally pay off? Yes, the hype is real. Interesting. So that's more or less an agreement with us. How about prediction number 2? Well, Chief, interesting. People disagree. Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's just they're still thinking digital at this point. And for a lot of companies earlier in the maturity life cycle, they're probably right about that. We're just maybe a little bit more ambitious about that and a little more aspirational.
Yep. All right. How about 3? Amazon began. Well, that's a landslide. Okay. So y'all manufacturers, you got to embrace Amazon business, I guess, and distributors, you got to differentiate from them. Okay. Prediction 4, pure headless. Interesting. Yep. Composable, 67%. So, yep. People agreed with us there. Great. Prediction 5, B2B companies see the ROI on digital as omni-channel. So, yep. Okay. Interesting. Okay, cool. So that shifts, and then will hiring challenges persist? No. Interesting. People didn't agree with us here. I guess most of you aren't hiring. Well, maybe it's a mixed bag. Those of you who are hiring, 47% of you are probably in the market.
You know what it is? I think it's for good talent, quality people, there's always going to be a shortage.
Oh, that's really true. So thanks, folks, for joining us today on our predictions. Everyone on this will get a copy of this recording and the predictions document, which is coming out shortly. We hope you learned a lot today, and thanks for your comments as we went through. There's that beautiful 2024 predictions document. Thank you to all our panelists and special guests. Andy, any final words for the group before we break?
I'll see you in a week, and then we'll do this again next year, and hopefully we'll be right again.
That's right. Thanks so much for joining us, folks. We'll see you soon.